This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Hey, thank you so much, Manny. And yes, as Manny said, I am Downrigger Dale, and you have found yet again another Montana Outdoor Podcast. Thanks so much for downloading this podcast and joining the discussion today. We're going to talk about bears today. Bears are, I guess, for the sightseer, especially those that may be planning to come to Montana. That might be on your wildlife bucket list. I want to see a bear. Well, I don't blame you. They're pretty cool to see, from a distance, mind you. But the last thing you want to do is see a bear up close and personal walking out your front door. That's been happening a bit more often than we like here in Montana. In western Montana, there's been several instances lately of bears getting up close and personal. We've had some reports of bears actually getting inside of homes and that. So I thought it might be a good idea to check in with a bear specialist, an expert. And that would be my friend Jamie Jonkel, who he works with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in Montana in Region 2. He's the bear specialist for Region 2. That region is, for those of you that aren't familiar with the FWP regions, that would be around the greater Missoula area, a pretty large swath of Montana there. So we're going to check in with him, talk about bear-proofing property, also talk about they've been actually having some encounters with bears and homeless people down by the river, which is I think, kind of a new instance as well. But anyway, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. And you've been a little busy lately, huh?
Yeah, it's not too crazy yet. May is fairly busy. June, it kind of dies down. But then when we start getting more of our berries, our production of berries, the serviceberry, huckleberry, chokecherry, hawthorn, which are in the lower elevations at first, along the rivers, nice creek bottoms, that kind of thing, right where all the houses are. That's when it starts picking up. And then it gets really crazy in the fall, starting about September and through October. So we've been busy, but it hasn't been insane crazy by any means.
Well, just looking at some of the incidents, there's actually a really good website for those of you in Missoula called MissoulaBears.org, and that gives you a lot of information about where bear incidents have been taking place. But just looking at a few of them, it's been everywhere from Alberton, Donovan Creek, Evero, Frenchtown, up in Lincoln, 9 Mile, Rattlesnake, Upper Blackfoot. So a lot of bears. What would you say is the most interaction that people are having? Is it mostly black bear, or is it quite a few grizzlies as well?
Well, around the Missoula area and around most of western Montana, it's black bears. For every grizzly one might have in the area, there's just a lot more black bears. Mm-hmm. And so if you, the way I always gauge it is, I tell people this, if you've got raccoons hanging around, you've got skunks hanging around, it means you've got some food sources there that wildlife are interested in, be it bird feeder, be it garbage. And then the next one to show up is a black bear.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got black bears hitting your garbage on a regular basis, then yeah, you could easily start luring in a grizzly too. But, certain areas, like the Rocky Mountain front and the Blackfoot River headwaters, you've got actually more grizzly activity than you do black bear. So it depends on where you live, and what the bear population is around you.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think is the main cause of bears coming in contact with people? Is it usually garbage? Is that the main attractant, or what would you say is the one that causes most of these problems, where you're having people and bears meet up on their property?
Yeah, it's kind of it's complicated. It seems like the thing that first draws a bear onto your property, especially if you're in a rural area or living along the edges of a town or a community. It's the green grass, the heavily watered lawns.
Oh, really? Huh.
They like the berries and they like the natural foods along these sort of riparian areas or these creek bottoms. And when it gets a little drier, they crave green. They crave the vegetation. And when you mow those lawns, a lot of times you've got this really tasty, grass, dandelions, plankton, all that kind of stuff. So
really?
A lot of times the first thing that'll draw them in is the green grass. And then if you do have a bird feeder, it doesn't take them long to figure that out. And then, of course, garbage. Once they figure out garbage, holy smokes, it's like going from green grass to potato salad and spare ribs, and once they get in that mode, I mean, it's a hard one to break. It's kind of like a person finding a quarter, and he starts looking around, and then he finds $1, and then he finds $100 bill, and next thing you know, he's digging a trench, looking for more money.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, garbage and foods are like money to a bear.
From what I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, once a bear really gets into that, there's not much way of breaking them, and that often leads then to you having to put a bear down.
Yeah, they're kind of like us. Some of us, we all have our vices. Some of us can smoke, one cigarette a day. Other guys, or gals have to smoke 2 packs a day. Some of us can drink 1 beer, and others,
Mm-hmm.
And so each bear is an individual. And what I've seen is, we'll have bears that'll come in just every year for the seasonal foods. And if they stumble onto the garbage, they'll sure take advantage of it. But then they kind of move off and they don't do it again. And then the next fall, they'll come in and do the same thing. Other bears, will get addicted to birdseed, especially.
Really?
I always say birdseed is like a drug, and it is in a way, in that it's so heavily full of fat and all those oils that bears start craving the seed, and they'll get addicted to birdseed and then start, going from house to house. And every time they hear a dog barking, they'll go to that house thinking, well, maybe they'll have a bird feeder too.
Mm-hmm.
So bird feeders are a tough one, and as well as garbage. But we do have individual bears. Like we've had a couple grizzlies, female grizzlies especially, that will come down when it's a bad food year, a desperate year, like a real dry year, or a year when you've had a frost that knocks all the blossoms off, the natural berries. And in order to survive with her young, she'll I need to go down there in the low elevations where there's good food. But sadly, some of her offspring might go, wow.
Yeah.
I remember when mom took me down there. Well, I want to ride the Ferris wheel every day, and
Yeah.
bang, they get addicted and go into that. It's called food conditioned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Is what it's called.
And so at that point, when let's kind of take it through the steps. So the bears have come out of hibernation. It was a long winter for a lot of us, but for bears, I assume long winter doesn't really bug them too much in that they're hibernating through that time. but when they come out, then they're out looking for food. With this long winter that we had, does that cause bears to come lower and try to get onto property to find food, or what causes you to have a bad bear year or a good bear year?
Yeah, moisture is a big one. So, a hard, long winter isn't that bad. In fact, a hard, long winter that puts a lot of moisture up in the mountains, and we got good creek flow, all the potholes fill, is good. And then better yet is if you have a rainy year. If we have a real kind of cold, wet Montana summer, we hardly have any conflicts at all. It's because it's so wet. There's so many natural foods, and they can get by without even, coming down for a little garbage. But it's dryness. And then if you get a freak frost, like if the bears come out, they've got plenty of winter kill to feed on. They got plenty of spring green up. They got lots of elk calves and fawns to feed on. Everything's going fine until that heat wave comes in and it starts baking the soil and drying up the vegetation. And then that heat will get the berries on and they'll get ripe. But then last few years, what's been going on for my area is that heat stays and then the berries get overripe and drop. And then all of a sudden you're, with one of these situations where you got all the bears down in the bottoms and all the berries are gone, but then they're like, well, I'll just cast off on garbage and bird feeders and maybe I'll check out someone's freezer and maybe I'll go into a garage. And that seems to be what's been happening the last few years. A lot of people are like, oh, it's an overpopulation of bears. We need to bump more bears, kill more bears. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's this dang dryness, that's been going on.
Well, let's talk about a little bit about that, because we do have, kind of both sides of the fence here in Montana. Some people are saying, well, we really do have too many grizzlies. I know they've talked quite a bit about getting grizzly bears delisted, and at that point, FWP would, at some point, I assume, be involved in the management of grizzly bears. Do you see that as a viable solution at all, or do you feel that grizzly bears really should stay on the endangered list?
Well, our grizzly populations have really done quite well. We've got, compared to, at the turn of the century, boy, we'd knocked them down to almost nothing. And then, through the 20s and 30s and 40s, even those ones that were considered nothing were almost gone. And then they kind of came back, and they've come back quite well. It took a long time for them to come back, but they're doing good now. And if we could get them managed as a big game species, and have a little hunting, that would be great.
So let's talk a bit about how we bear-proof our property. I get emails of people saying, well, gee, it's been this tough, long winter for deer and all that. So, I know we're not supposed to feed deer, but it's okay to put a little out. And I always tell them, no, that's like the worst thing you can do. Does that attract bears?
Yeah. Something we've seen, and a lot of people don't communicate it very well, but if you move into a house, kind of in a pretty nice wild chunk of country, and you slap down a salt lick, or you slap down, a deer block, or you start, feeding, the deer and elk. This is why the state of Montana made it illegal, to salt and feed deer, is pretty soon the trail system shift because of the use. And what I've seen, when I get a call, hey, there's this grizzly at my place, he's the fourth one that's come through. I don't understand it. I'll be like, well, how long have you lived here? Been here 5 years now, and I've never had a bear, and I'll notice a salt lick, and then I'll start doing a circle around the house, to go down the creek bottom, and walk up the ridge, and you'll see all the trails coming down off the ridge, coming in from the creek, and they all go to the yard at that salt lick. And so in essence, in a way, you kind of, in essence, create a truck stop or a game pocket, if you will, at your place. And you route all the trails through your property. And then, a bear will come along or a lion will come along and go, hey, this is the place to hunt. Look at all these deer. Mm-hmm. Or a bear will go, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm finding all these dead deer around this place, where they're getting hit by the highway.
Yep.
And you just create a little predator haven too, when you feed and salt.
So there's one thing right there, folks, is you're really not doing the wildlife a favor, though it may seem like it at the time. You're really not. So let's talk about how we bear-proof our home, our property. What are some of the things that we should go out and look for and do that to keep bears away so you don't have that situation?
Well, the best way I can do that is I've got a cabin. It's up to Blackfoot, pretty remote area. And then I've got my house, on the edge of town. And both sites have a lot of bear activity. My cabin, because I'm not there often, I just make dang sure that, I don't have anything outside that might be considered food related. I've got no bird feeders. When I have some horses up there or whatever, I make sure everything's locked tight in the trailer. And then when I leave my cabin, I've actually got some pretty good shutters, that I put over the windows because, when you go in the backcountry or in the park or you stumble across an old trapper cabin in the woods, I mean, they bear-proof those,
Yeah.
They did the old plywood or boards with nails in them and all that kind of stuff. So I always make sure my cabin's locked up super tight. And a lot of the places I see that have been hit by bears, I mean, I could literally break into the cabin if I was 10 years old and had a spoon, But then it's different at my home site. I myself don't have bird feeders. I know a lot of folks love feeding birds.
Okay.
I always give this one little storyline of like how to train a bear to come into your house. And it's all with a bird feeder, and you put up the bird feeder and you wait till you got a bear coming in and you're like, okay, now I'm going to bring that bird feeder over onto my porch to, because I don't want them tearing the bird feeder down out in the yard. I'm going to bring it over on my porch.
And here he comes.
Then, the bear comes to the porch,
yeah.
And then it's like, well, I'm going to put it up on the porch, up on my back veranda, and then the bear comes on the back veranda, and then it kind of goes from there where finally the people are like, take the bird feeder down, but they put it in the garage, and the bird seed, and then the bear, break in the garage. So that type of stuff can really train a bear up. But then your neighbor, you might be doing everything right, but your neighbors might be training up 2 or 3. So you'll get these bears that'll become professional. And even though you're doing everything right, your neighbor's doing everything wrong and be training up a bear a week. I just make sure that my garbage is always in the garage shut. Mm-hmm. And then, I always hate having to go out early in the morning. It's like, gosh, I got to get up at 4 to get my garbage can out there for the garbage truck to pick up. I'm like, I don't want to do that. It'd be nice to have a fence right off the back porch that was electric, but on the inside, wood. So that, I wouldn't get shocked, my dog wouldn't get shocked, or my daughter wouldn't get shocked. But then on the outside, as it loops around the yard, have hot wires, have hot ground wires. And, by golly, if I did that, I could keep my garbage in the backyard, and then I wouldn't have to worry about it. And then I could keep my chickens in that same area, and I wouldn't have to worry about it. And by golly, I'm going to plant my pear tree in there. I'm going to plant my little apple tree. And, if I get a deer, I can hang it in the yard. So that's the, not the lazy bad way, but it's a way that I was thinking is like, I could contain everything, and then I could have a kind of a relatively normal lifestyle like I would in town, but I'd be, solving problems. So that's one idea.
Hey, Jamie, we're going to take a little break here for our sponsors, and when we come back, I want to talk to you a bit about people that have and raise animals, because I know a lot of Montanans like to raise their own chickens, and they may keep sheep or that for their kids for 4-H and all that. So when we come back, I want you to talk a bit about that and what we might be able to do. You talked a little bit about the electric fence and that, but we'll talk more about that when we come back right after this. So I'm going to take a little minute here and talk about one of our great sponsors, and that's Superior Hardwoods of Montana. They've been doing hardwoods for 41 years. It's hard to believe they've been doing that for that long, but 41 years. And through all those years, that make it since 1977, they have been constantly growing and improving their business and knowledge, and what they've ended up with is pretty incredible, folks. 100,000 square feet of flooring is waiting for you to take a look at. They're located in Missoula, Montana. If you go down Highway 93 through Missoula, you're heading south on 93 from Missoula, you're going to see Superior Hardwoods of Montana right across the highway from that great big round workout place called the Peak Athletic Center. You can see it right there. Anyway, they have developed a process there that's really unique. They call it guiding you through the woods. And what they are able to do is take all this 41 years of incredible knowledge and be able to help you figure out exactly what kind of wood you want to add to your home, whether it's paneling or siding or, beautiful floors. And they've added really, I think, kind of an exciting series called the Pioneer Series, Wilderness and Heirloom Series. They're floors that can be, and woods, I should say, that can be specifically crafted to your specs of what you need. And another thing they've done is be able to repurpose woods. So, literally you're putting a flooring down or paneling up in your house that is a piece of history. And it has that unique character to it, and they've really brought that back to life through their milling process and that. It's just incredibly unique. It's something that you really should go see. Now, you can go to their website, superior-hardwoods.com, and there you can get a really good flavor for what I've been talking about here. Or you can go on to Superior Hardwoods right there in Missoula and take a look. Be ready to take a long look because they have so many great things. 11 acres, basically, of stunning architectural lumber sitting there waiting for you. So I can't stress enough, go see Superior Hardwoods of Montana, either on the web at superior-hardwoods.com or stop by and see them in Missoula. You can call them 251-2272. Of course, that's area code 406, 5120 Highway 93 South. There in Missoula is where you find them. And again, superior-hardwoods.com. Let them guide you through the woods. And we're back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Jamie Jonkel is my guest. He's a bear specialist with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and we're talking about trying to help you folks come up with some good ideas to bear-proof your house. We are seeing some bear activity now. Jamie and his staff have had to go deal with some bears that have got addicted, as we were talking about earlier in the podcast, and decided they got to get into that garbage or food. Jamie, let's talk a bit about animals that we like to raise. I know a lot of people like to raise chickens. Some people like to have maybe some lambs or a steer or something like that. A lot of kids get into 4-H and that. Is that a big attractant for bears?
Well, like when I was younger, there wasn't as much of that hobby farming. Like we had chickens on more of the ranch sort of operations. And we had our typical livestock industry, kind of sheep industry places. But yes, in the last few years, it seems like, or last 10 years or so, it's become very, very popular to hobby farm, raise your own food, save money.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, chicken issues were never a big thing in the past. We had the occasional, bear, lion call on chickens. But all of a sudden, 15 years or so ago, and part of that's just Western Montana growing too. But I just noticed a huge increase of issues with chickens. And in fact, we amongst ourselves started calling chickens garbage cans with wings because they just all of a sudden, so many bears and lions both and everything figured out chickens. And half of my calls were, my chickens have been killed. And the same with, rabbits, hutches, 4-H stuff too, but it's so easy, to just slap up a little bit of electric fence. It tunes me up when I touch it. It's the worst feelings. It's almost like your heart jumps out of your chest and into your mouth for a minute, and it's like very unpleasant. It's not painful, but it's unpleasant. And boy, that's become a great tool for keeping bears and other predators out too. But one would want to read up on it. You don't just want to run down and grab any old Energizer. It has to have a pretty good jolt to it. It has to have a higher joule rating. By joules, best way it got described to me for joule rating, like a lot of the ones that are cheaper, or have 0.4 joules, 0.1, you can get all sorts of stuff. Great for horses. But if you want to pack a wallop to a bear, you need to have 0.7 joules or better.
Okay.
And you'd have to have, a lot of people will just throw up one wire and they're like, it didn't work. With the electric fences, a shock off of one wire through the soil isn't that great. So they want you to have alternating hot ground wires where the Energizer is connected to those ground wires as well. And then you become the circuit or the bear becomes a circuit. Mm-hmm. And holy smokes, me getting a shock in my bare feet, mm-hmm. With one wire and no ground wire is unpleasant, but bearable. But boy, oh boy, if I'm standing on a piece of metal that's grounded to that Energizer and then I touch that single hot wire, holy smokes.
Right.
You won't do it again. And so that's the kind of fence you need. And they're pretty easy to maintain and they're fairly cheap. But what's nice is there's some really good programs out there where you can get assistance on fence.
Oh, okay.
Defenders of Wildlife has a pretty cool program, where you can get up to $500 toward a fence, and even they'll have a fella come out and help you build it. If you don't feel like maybe working with, Defenders of Wildlife, Wildlife Services, Department of Agriculture's APHIS program or Animal Control Program, Wildlife mm-hmm. Services, they call it now. They've got a really sweet program where they'll do a 50-50 match.
Oh,
and,
okay.
You can get into a pretty good electric fence for almost nothing. And if you're a bigger operator, like you have a sheep and you want a sheep bedding ground, Wildlife Services program is great. But then, you hook into a guy like me, a bear manager with FWP, or someone on the Rocky Mountain front like Chad White or Wesley Sarmento. We actually have some pretty good support groups, like with, NRCS, Forest Service, other folks, partners with Fish and Wildlife Program, with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They'll pitch in money too. And even if you've got a bigger operation, you can get a pretty nice fence for pretty much not nothing. You got to put in a little bit, but
there's
get a nice fence.
There's good assistance out there. So that's a big help. So we want to watch where we're doing our garbage, watch our bird feeders and all that. But let's say we've been, we've listened to this podcast and we've got everything set up, but doggone it, here comes the bears. And you're seeing bear activity in that. What should someone do if they encounter a bear? Let's say they hear something rummaging around in the garbage or near the chicken coop. What should they do when they come on to that bear?
Well, the first thing I do when someone says, "Oh, I've got this problem," I'll come there, and the first thing I do is I'm like, "Okay, what's bringing them in? What's sucking them in?" And it might be a garbage plastic pail filled with chicken feed, and I'll be like, "Okay, I tell you what, you got any steel boxes around? If you don't have a steel box, hey, you want me to look, see if I got one? Because I actually keep a lot of materials like that, from garage sales and stuff. If I see a big old steel truck box, man, I snap that up. I can help people with a better storage sort of thing for chicken feed or whatever. But then, it might be just the garbage out, or maybe it's a coop that's a little flimsy, and we'll actually help folks build an electric fence. If they're like, can you help me? I'm like, heck yeah, I'll supply you an energizer if you're willing to work on it Saturday. I'll come up with a crew of two. But the big thing is, you getting a hold of a person like me, a bear manager, pretty early on in the game. We might be able to turn the behavior. The thing to remember is, it might be a black bear, but it might be a grizzly.
Okay.
And then the grizzlies right now are federally protected, and a lot of people are like, well, I think you can shoot them, but you can't. And boy, you can get into some big time hot water, so, we're here. We provide the service, like my team, that I work with, we've got 4 guys, and so we can get out there and respond when it gets real crazy. The wardens will help. So there's a lot of, call Fish and Game and we'll do our best to help you out.
Okay, Jamie, we're going to take another quick break, but where I was going with that, and you can answer this when we come back, is as far as if I come, face to face with a bear, what is it I should do? Answer that when we come back.
Okay.
First, though, I want to talk a bit about another one of our great sponsors. That is Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. When you're ready to invest in a new or pre-owned cargo trailer or a truck bed or whatever you're looking for, they're ready to, and I love how they explain this. They say, Dale, we're just ready to exceed people's expectations. That's what we're going to do. They're very proud to be dealers of very top quality brands. And I think these brands all kind of gravitated to Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailers because of their reputation. They carry CM truck beds, top of the line. Diamond C trailers, again, top of the line. If you want the right trailer, that it's sitting there waiting for you. They have a great selection, and if they don't have it in stock, they're going to track it down for you and get it done. They have, I think, probably the best sales department there. They have financing. They service what they sell. These days, unfortunately, not a lot of trailer companies even do that. They do. They, of course, have an on-site parts department as well. So whether you're going to fix it yourself or you need them to do it, they got you covered there too. Their experience is second to none. In Montana, towing a trailer is kind of like second nature for most of us. We need it to get the job done, whether we're hauling our horses around to a show or just to go out riding or you're using your horse for work. You got to have the right trailer. they've got it there at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. For those of you that may be first timers that, it's about time I get a trailer, I don't even know where to start. Easy. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They will guide you right through it and get you the right trailer for what you need. They're not the kind of folks that are going to oversell you or anything like that. They're located at 5680 Expressway. That's in Missoula, Montana. You can call them 406-549-4243. Another great way to check out what I'm talking about here is just go see them online. That's rmtte.com. rmtte.com. Go there. You can take a look at what they do. You can learn more about the company. And I'll tell you what, from that day forward, you're going to say, yep, those are the folks. When I need the new truck bed, when I need the trailers, or come this winter when I need a Boss snowplow, that's who I'm going to see. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They're the best out there. Okay, back to Jamie Jonkel. So I walk out of my house and boom, there I am, darn near face to face with a bear.
Okay.
What do I do?
Yeah. So, if you got going out with the garbage can and you run into a bear, in the back alley, and it snaps and huffs at you, you don't want to start screaming and shouting and acting like a prey. Like I do see, I always tell these gals, I'm like, well, don't scream and run like that. That gets the blood pumping, just be real calm. Live like you are around a horse.
Okay.
Moving real slow. And then, if you look at some of the native cultures, like some really good YouTube videos out there, with some of the Native Americans, fishing at these weir sites and stuff. And they're like, well, just don't be rude, be polite and kind of ignore them and move slow, and they will do the same. And I think there's a lot to that, just being calm. It's kind of like the one analogy I use, like if I do go into a bar, to go have a beer, and I I sit down, and then some guy's like, hey, that's my chair. I'll kind of act like I don't hear him, and I'll drop something and I'll grab it, and then I'll pretend I don't hear him and move on down the
exactly
bar, where,
that's a good way to put it. You're going to get your butt beat if you go up against him. So the best thing to do is just move on out, nice and quiet.
Yeah. And I've seen bears do that to me many times. Like a lot of times they're like, the bear, I scared him and he just kind of stood there and didn't do anything. And he started feeding. And I'm like, well, that's displacement activity. He's pretending you aren't there. And he's showing great interest in the grass because he knows he's a little bit too close to you. And so he's slowly, pretending like you aren't a danger, giving you signals that, he's not a danger too. But boy, if you got a bear that's laying his ears back and huffing and puffing, that's a warning. If you got a bear slapping the ground and huffing, that means he's saying, you're too close. I'm telling you, you're too close. I'm here. The last thing you want to do is walk toward it.
Okay.
What I usually do in those cases, is I'll start veering the other way, but I'll kind of scratch a tree, move on the other side of the tree. Once I'm on the other side of the tree, I'll slowly move back toward my door, and then usually the bear peels out too. But, the one that's always the scariest is, spooking a mom. You spook a mom who's got two little cubs, no different than, the neighbor lady who, came out and spanked you because you were wrestling too rough with her little kids. Mothers are kind of spooky. And then, a bear that does discover a carcass, let's say a horse or a truckload of garbage, he's like, man, I'm not going to share this with anyone. I got to keep this. It'll make me fat. And they go into that kind of defensive mode. But just big thing is treat them like you would a horse. Move real slow, move back, and then I a lot of people will poo-poo bear spray, but I always think of bear spray as like, okay, in a way, it's turning me into a skunk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've got this device that, I can spray this nasty stuff and get in their eyes. And yeah, it's that sort of defense mechanism. It's like the skunk's, mechanism. And it can really stop an attack, but it has to be, you have to have it handy,
Mm-hmm.
The problem with, people are like, oh, just bust them with some bird shot. They're all, load a little rock salt. We've had so many bears that do get shot in the hind end, with a load of bird shot. I think that's just being dusted. But I tell you, I couldn't tell you how many different bears we've had that are blind. You're like, okay, what's he doing? He's kind of walking around the backyard and putting his feet out, and stumbling into stuff. And, when we get there, we usually have to put them down, but we'll find they're blind from birdshot.
Okay.
A bear will be real, real sick, or be found dead. And then you'll see, a bunch of pellets that have gotten just inside the stomach, and peritonitis kicks in, and slow, agonizing death. So, and then, for defense, especially with grizzlies, the big one, is, they're tough.
Yeah. And
you've heard all the stories. They're true. A wounded grizzly, you might have a big old 44, but when he's is charging you, it's hard to take aim. And then a lot of times if you do take aim and get a good shot, they might roll over and topple down, but they're tough.
So what do you do? Let's say somebody calls you and says, I'm repeatedly getting raided by this bear and all that. What do you guys do to decide that, okay, we need to either euthanize this bear or we're going to trap it? Take us through the steps that you go through to decide what should be done with this bad news bear, so to speak.
Well, yeah. So some bears just been kind of trained up, and sometimes you can untrain them if you get rid of what's ever sucking them in. But sometimes you'll get these individual bears that'll have that little glint in their eye.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, these kids, like your cousin will have a couple kids,
Mm-hmm.
and you just kind of notice that one of them, is like, little Danny there seems a little different, and sure enough, when they're 14, they steal their first car and, do this and that, you will see that in certain bears too. And sometimes, I'll have a bear that I might have just met for the first time, and it might have hit just one house, but you can look at the way he maybe got into the garbage or got into the garage and the way his behavior is. You're like, well, I think this is a little Danny.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have removed certain bears that are exhibiting these sort of extreme behaviors where I'm like, okay, there's no way we can possibly turn him. And we will, remove them. Other times, it's like, well, old Bob there, left 27 sacks of fermented grain out along his house, and sucked in every bear in the country, True, he was in the backyard, but, who wouldn't be? If I was a bear, I'd be in the backyard too. Same with apples, like we get a lot of calls where like, there's a bear in my yard, you need to come trap it. And instead, when I get there, I'll grab a bag and start picking up all the apples on the ground, but a lot of times just getting rid of the attractant, and the problem's gone. That's 90% of it right there.
Okay. Is that a pretty normal time? Is it often that you do have to euthanize a bear? What is it that tells you, okay, this bear's, we got to put him down?
Yeah. So we had a bear like that last week. And, at first when he first came down, he was just going for the green grass, but he was also real comfortable in the backyard. So we started watching him. Pretty soon, he started hitting garbage cans. and he started moving further downstream, and we were able to track him because of the communication. That's one big thing, boy. Communicate with your neighbors, communicate with your association.
Mm-hmm.
Let others know that they're doing that so that they can kind of prepare and clean up, and let me know, let Fish and Game know, so that we're aware of the situation. But this little bear slowly was showing us that, okay, he knows garbage. He entered a garage, got some garbage, and then as soon as I got a call about him entering a house, I was like, he's got to go. And what happened is kids were moving in, I believe, and they had the door wide open. They're moving all their stuff, and they're like either side of a couch, trying to bring it in. And all of a sudden, there's a bear in the living room.
Oh boy!
It was just a little black bear, but I was like, okay. And then he said, and then the neighbor had him over there too. So I called the neighbor, and theirs was a little different. They were doing some carpentry work, and saw a bear but weren't paying attention. But then when they went to the sawhorses where they had a plank with all their lunches on it,
mm-hmm.
inside the house, the lunches were gone. So right away, we're like, okay, this bear has to go. And so we started targeting him, and we had an opportunity to remove him. It was a little bit too public, the wardens darted him and had to lower him out of a tree. But then, we all discussed it, and we were like, this little fella's been trained up too much, and we got to take him out.
Yeah. So when they start entering homes and property like that, it's time to go. Huh?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, we've had some of these little bears are like, okay, I'm going to find a new home range, and they'll follow the Clark Fork River down. And next thing you know, it's 6 o'clock in the morning in Missoula, and he's like, well, there's not much traffic going on here. I'll keep going downstream. And then
mm-hmm.
at 8 o'clock, holy moly, and he'll get stuck in town. And I call that being lost in humanity. And a lot of times I'm like, okay, is this bear a garbage bear, or is he lost? And I'll be like, I think this guy's lost. And then we just kind of give him a little ride, get him either free darted or trap him and, relocate him.
Have you ever had any close calls, since you have to remove these bears yourself? Have you ever been attacked by a bear, Jamie?
I'm really careful. We've got some really good protocols, and whenever I do anything, I'm always worst case scenario. And then with grizzlies, my motto is never make yourself available. So I always follow lots of rules, and it keeps me out of trouble. But that's from years of working on bears. And then, we've got our little meetings every year where we all kind of have to have our training. I've definitely had some interesting experiences,
mm-hmm.
Which I kind of base some of my recommendations off of, where I've been out in the woods, and encountered bears, grizzlies and black both. One job I had down in Yellowstone Park was doing the carcass surveys in the spring, and we'd monitor bear use of elk carcasses and bison carcasses. So it had a lot of interactions. But the big thing is just being cool and collect, and then never in a hurry, and always looking to the right, to the left, and listening for snaps, and, moving slow through the woods, That's why it always drives me insane when I run into these people, that are jogging at 5 a.m. with a headlamp and spandex pants and earphones on. I'm like, holy smokes! You realize you're jogging through some pretty wild country here, even though you're on the edge of town. There's a lot of lions in here and black bears you could spook, or they might think you're a deer. So and then I always carry bear spray. I learned that a long time ago. I also carry a firearm as well. But I've learned that bear spray can keep me out of trouble, and I've used it quite a few times.
Okay, so that tells us right there, bear spray works, and it's important to use, and and have it with you. But the key there, from what I understand, is you need to know how to use your bear spray. And I think that's where people get tripped up a little there. Or where would you direct people to go to learn a little bit more about being more bear aware in that? The FWP has some information online, don't they?
Yeah, we've got some really good sites, and then we've got some instruction too. One of our FWP bear educators, Danielle Euler, puts on great programs. So if you're interested in having a neighborhood association or something at the fair, you could get a hold of Danielle, and she actually does training and has bear spray, inert bear spray that people can use and practice on, just get a feeling for the can, that kind of thing. But there are some really excellent videos out there. There's also a lot of, there's some videos you can usually tell in the first couple minutes if it's some guy that doesn't know anything.
Yeah. He likes to be on YouTube more than he really knows what he's doing. Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah.
You got to watch for those ones. But then the one that I think is one of the best, it's, let's see. It's the North American Bear Society put it out, and it's out of Canada. Oh gosh, I should know it. Staying Safe in Bear Country.
Staying Safe in Bear Country. Well,
yeah, and it's a oldie, but it's a goodie.
For you folks that are listening to this podcast, in the podcast description, you probably saw it when you first came to this podcast. I'm going to put some links down there for you. So I'll put some links to the FWP sites. I'll put some links to some good videos and that for you folks that want to learn about this. And that's important. Plus, I'll also put some links on how to contact the FWP and steer you to the right place there and do that. Now, last thing I wanted to ask you about, Jamie, and I'll let you go. I really do appreciate all the time you've taken here with me. But one thing that I've heard that has been kind of a new thing for bear attracting and that which is a sensitive subject, and I certainly don't want to get people riled up and blame anybody, but we are seeing a fairly large homeless population in Missoula and in other towns. And from what I've heard, that has become an attraction for bears as well, of people living out on the down on the riverbank. And of course, that some of them have come from wherever, don't even think about bears, and now they're leaving garbage and that out. What kind of a problem have you noticed with the homeless population and bear activity?
They're having to live on the fringes, right where the bears have learned that garbage is available at home sites. So half the folks that are homeless that I've been dealing with, are sleeping with their food because they have to. If they leave it out, someone might take it.
Right. Yeah.
And so they aren't following the rules that one would have to follow, let's say, in the backcountry if you were doing the same thing.
Are the cities around Montana trying to do anything about this? I mean, how do you to deal with that? That's got to be a tough problem, but bears are, I'm sure they're getting conditioned to it that, hey, that's probably a good place to find some food.
Yeah, Missoula's going through it right now. So is Whitefish, Kalispell. Some cities are like, here's $50, get on the bus, go to Missoula.
Yeah,
so that's the way they deal with it.
I have heard that too.
Yeah, but Missoula's really struggling with it right now, and it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. But I like anything, it just involves everyone sitting down and working together to figure out how to solve the problem. It can't be done by one group. It can't be done by an angry group. It can't be done by one church. I mean, everyone has to sit down and figure it out.
Yeah. So those are some of the issues that FWP has had to deal with, and I'll keep you posted on this podcast on how that saga starts to unfold. But it's an unfortunate one. But the problem there is if they get conditioned on that, then it can bring them right to the property owners too. So we're all going to have to work together on this and find a way to make this work. Any other thoughts that you'd like to leave with us before we go, Jamie, as far as what the public can do to coexist with our furry friends out there?
A little bit of patience is good, but it's a pretty common sense stuff. What it takes is getting key individuals to just start working with neighbors, especially new ones. We see this all the time where there'll be someone bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, fresh out of the East Coast or West Coast, move here, find a beautiful cabin at the end of the road, and there will be no problems. But in 1 year, that individual, because they're doing everything wrong, will train up 10 bears.
Yeah.
So sometimes you got to help the newbies, the new people.
Yeah, and I think you're making a great point here, and that is that we got to be good neighbors, and if we all work together and just keep an eye out, and when you see that so and so has a problem bear, offer some help, and it becomes, especially when you're on those outskirts, you almost develop that neighborhood watch kind of thing, and you communicate with each other, and pretty soon the bears know, okay, well, we're going to stay away from there. That's not a good place to go. And I think if we all stick together, we can get along with those guys. Yeah.
So much of it too is just like, hey, I'm going to the dump. Want me to throw your stuff in too?
There you go. Good point. And, very good point.
Just, get rid of that pile of garbage next to their house.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Jamie, thank you so much. And again, I'll leave some contact information and all that here at the bottom of the podcast, so that way everybody can know how to get in touch with them. And if we stick together, be safe, and we all play nice. And I think hopefully these bears will move on, and we'll all have a good summer.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
You bet. Thanks, Jamie. Jamie Jonkel from the FWP. And again, I'll leave some contact information for you there. So that's it, folks. Got to be bear aware. It's that time of the year. I guess in Montana, it's pretty much year-round be that time of the year. So until then, you guys take care, report what's going on, watch out for your neighbors, and we'll see you soon right here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock, high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.